Hey everybody, welcome back to Palm Coast Real Estate with Brett. Today I'm going to give you an honest assessment of why are people moving to Palm Coast, Florida, the good and the bad. Well, first and foremost, one of the good reasons, we are right by the coast. This could be your lifestyle, sitting here with your morning coffee, watching the sunrise over the beach, which is fantastic. Now, first of all, I was not born and raised here. I also chose to move here. One of the reasons that we wanted to move here was that we wanted to be on the northeast coast of Florida because there's simply less hurricane risk here. Hurricanes are always a part of life in Florida, but the northeast coast gets a lot less direct hurricane hits, meaning insurance is going to be cheaper than in places like South Florida. Now, Palm Coast is a rapidly growing town. So that is one of the big complaints that I hear from people. People who've been here for a long time resent the growth, they don't like it. But really, if they knew what they were getting into when they came to Palm Coast, they would know that Palm Coast has always been a town that has been planned to grow until it has at least 250,000 people. It's always been the plan for the town. And growth does obviously come with its growing pains. People complain about traffic, which has gotten worse over recent years. However, if you're coming from an urban area, it's going to be absolutely nothing to you. It's nothing like that at all. You might have to sit and wait for a light to cycle once, rarely maybe twice to get through it during the busier parts of the day on busier streets. But there's also places where you could say, oh, well, this is still a stop sign, it should be a light, or this light should be expanded to have more turn lanes, this and that, and the city is doing those things. It's just difficult to keep up when the growth is happening so fast. But growth does have its upsides too, where if you were to come here now, while the town has, a little over 100,000 people right in this point, it's hard to know exactly where we are, but if it doubles in size over the years when you're here, what's that going to do for your property value? I think we all know that property is more valuable in larger cities. So not that this is ever going to become a huge city, but has a lot of growth left to come. So your property value is very likely going to go up over time if the town continues to grow. And I have to say, as someone who came from what was more of a dying town to a town that is rapidly growing, it's actually rather refreshing to me living somewhere where people want to come rather than people want to escape from. Now, it is also a new town. So I've talked about this in other videos as well. Being a new town planned by engineers with properly maintained canals, there's less flood risk here than in other areas of Florida, which is a big concern for a lot of people, right? Flooding is an issue in Florida. The vast majority of Palm Coast is in flood zone X, which is great, meaning in those places, flood insurance is not mandatory, and if you decide to get it anyway, it's going to be much, much cheaper. Now, one of the things I do hear people complain about is lack of job opportunity here in Palm Coast, which I will give them that's a legitimate complaint. I definitely agree. We need more businesses coming to the area. However, it's not like there's nothing. And you also have St. Augustine, about 35 minutes to the north, and Daytona, the same distance to the south. A lot of people of working age do end up commuting to either St. Augustine or Daytona, and it's a little bit of a commute, but it's not terrible. So that there's opportunity within reach of Palm Coast if you can't find anything here in town as far as what your career path is. And hopefully that improves. It will improve over time as Palm Coast continues to grow. More businesses are going to come here for sure. One other plus for Palm Coast is that it is more affordable than St. Augustine. St. Augustine's very touristy. Lots of people love the culture there, want to be there, but it's more expensive. And it's still a lot cheaper in this area, definitely, than somewhere like South Florida. Okay, I actually know people and have worked with people who are moving up to this area from South Florida just because it's so crowded down there and property values are so high down there. So we do, of course, by and large, have an affordability crisis across the nation right now as far as housing goes. But Palm Coast, as far as this area goes, is much more affordable than a lot of the other places in the state, which is great. So one complaint I hear people talk about in this area in Palm Coast is the water bill, which I think is really unfounded. Most people, from what I hear and knowing from my own water bill, I'm paying about $150 to $200 a month, which may sound high right off the bat, but there's actually a lot included in that. Our trash pickup is contracted by the city, which we have great trash pickup. We get it twice a week. One of those days also has recycling. The other has large item pickup, and we have a yard waste day. So we have great trash pickup that's included in the water bill. And then you also have sewer maintenance in that. And like I talked about, our canals and swales being maintained by the city, that's also included in your water bill. So I think the people looking at the water bill and complaining about it and this kind of standard basic fees that come with it every month, they aren't really thinking about the services that we're getting and the fact that they don't have a separate trash bill, for instance. But that is a very common complaint here. Now, one other reason people are moving here right now is new construction incentives. Since the town is growing so rapidly, there's new construction all over the place, and builders are really trying to offload their product. Once those homes are built, they don't want them sitting empty, they want them sold. So new builders are giving great incentives right now. They call it flex cash usually, where it'll be thousands of dollars a lot of the time. And you can use that to lower the overall cost, cover your closing costs, or buy down your interest rate. Usually they'll leave that up to you. So that's really, really hard to beat. Not to mention that if you buy a new construction home, it's brand new. So you shouldn't anticipate a lot of problems with it for a while. And as I've also talked about before, new construction is cheaper to insure. So new construction opportunities are a great reason to move here and get a good home that doesn't come with a lot of problems, hopefully. One other complaint that I hear people talk about is lack of nightlife in Palm Coast, which I'll give that to them. I mean, if you're looking for a party town, Palm Coast is not it. Not that there aren't bars, but of course there are. Every town has them. But most of the bars that we have are going to be kind of like beachy restaurants first and bars second. They're not really staying open super late. There's only a couple bars I know of in town at all that stay open super late until like 2 a.m. So if you're looking for a place to party, it's probably not Palm Coast. St. Augustine has bars with, a lot of good cultural sites up there, and certainly you can go down to Daytona for the party life. You could live here in Palm Coast and then drive a little bit for that if that's what you're looking for. But lack of nightlife is something people complain about here. Finally, we may have major property tax relief on the way. I don't know if any of you have been paying attention to what passed through the Florida Senate finally recently, where now it's going to be voted on by the voters in November. It's going to require a constitutional amendment, and they are suggesting that starting in 2027, the homestead exemption for people's primary residence goes from $50,000 it is currently to $150,000, and then the following year, 2028, it goes all the way up to $250,000, meaning after 2 years, once it's in full effect, your primary residence, the first $250,000 worth of value, will not be taxed, which is absolutely massive for most people. It'll outright eliminate a lot of people's property taxes in the state and reduce a lot of others to nearly nothing. Now, they did exclude school taxes from that, so we're talking about city and county property taxes there, and it still does have to pass in November. The one important thing to know is that if it does pass, you have to already be a resident in Florida to get that new increased exemption by the end of this year. If you move here in 2027 or after, you'll have to wait 5 years before you're kind of considered a full resident and deserving of that new homestead exemption. So we could see a lot more people flooding into the state at the end of this year, trying to make it here so they can get that big property tax relief. So finally, one last complaint I do people here complain about is that a lot of people consider Palm Coast an HOA town. And it is true that the city has stricter regulations than most on certain things. Most of them are with a mind to keep the city looking nice. So they don't want people parking their cars on the street overnight past 10 p.m. They used to not allow people to have work vehicles in their driveway. That's just one thing that they've recently eased up on, to where you can have a work truck with company branding, a trailer, even a larger kind of box truck up to certain lengths. So the regulations are slowly easing over time. A lot of those were in place because Palm Coast really used to be a retirement community, and that's not really what it is anymore. There's plenty of younger people moving here now. So just be aware that the city code may be stricter than what you are used to coming from wherever you're moving from. Some of them I think are very sensible. Some of them I wish they would relax on, but over time, what we're seeing is a lot of those regulations are slowly being eased up on as well, because most people want it. So there's the good, the bad, and the ugly on Palm Coast, Florida. People are moving here. As you can see, it's a beautiful place to be, and there's a lot of pluses for being here in Palm Coast. All right, thanks for watching, guys. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment, like the video, and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time on Palm Coast Real Estate with Brett. Thanks for watching.